Did Jaws scare the bejesus out of you when you watched it as a kid? Or even if you just watch it now, did it make you afraid to go into a pool or into a lake or even into the ocean? I know it did for me and it did for a lot of people, but what it also did is it stimulated a lot of fundraising for research on great white sharks. And to this day, we know a lot more about great whites than we ever expected to before Jaws was put out. And there's a video out on the California State University Long Beach lab. It's the Shark Lab. They just put out a video about their research, when it started, why it started, and what type of research they do. And it might just get you interested in sharks and maybe interested in getting back in the water. We're going to talk about this video and why it's so important for more of these videos to come out on this episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. Let's start the show. Hey everybody, welcome back to another exciting episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Lewin, and this is a podcast where you find out what's happening with the ocean, how you can speak up for the ocean, and what you can do to live for a better ocean. And today we're going to be focusing on the great white shark, or white sharks, what a lot of shark scientists call it. We're going to talk about especially the ones in Southern California. And the reason why we're talking about this is not because it's a Beyond Jaws episode, that my other podcast that I co-host with Dr. David Ebert, but it's about science communication. And the CSULB, the California State University Long Beach Shark Lab, that's headed by Dr. Chris Lowe, who we've had on Beyond Jaws before, put out a video, a bit of a documentary on the Shark Lab. And it's the Shark Lab's call to action. And it's really to understand the research that goes on at the Shark Lab, the people, to get to know who they are, and then the lab itself, but also let's get to know a little bit more about the great white shark, because knowing about the great white shark will lead us to understand them more and maybe not fear them as much. Look, I do not want to be in the water at the same time as a great white shark as much as anybody else, maybe in a cage. Even then, I'm not that adventurous. I know a lot of people are, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's great, but I definitely don't want to be in the water with one. That's just me. But I would love to be on a boat, and I would love to see one in the water. I would love to see one in the wild. I would love to just be able to happen upon it on a boat, maybe on a fishing trip, or maybe just out with the Shark Lab itself, with Chris and all his Shark Lab mates, to say, hey, you know what? It'd be cool to watch them tag a shark, or watch them just monitor their behaviors, or do all the other things that they do at the Shark Lab to understand shark movements, especially juvenile sharks. The one thing that this lab has done is really understood this juvenile habitat, this important juvenile habitat in Southern California. That means it's near Santa Barbara, off of the shores of LA, Long Beach, of course. And they're tagging sharks. They're watching where they go. They're, using drone footage to see where these animals are, where the species is. And a lot of the times in the video, they say, hey, you know what? They're around swimmers, and they don't bother swimmers, and swimmers don't bother them. And it's very, 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 very small chance of having an interaction with a great white, especially those juveniles. And they're not hunting humans. They're hunting maybe sea lions. They're hunting fish. It's a very different type of prey that they're looking for. And if they do, unfortunately, have an event or interaction with a human, it's unfortunate, but it doesn't happen often, and it's by mistake. So I just think, not to be all about, hey, sharks are good for the planet, which they are. They're good for the ocean. They're very important to the ocean. But this is more about the video. This is more about a Shark Lab that is very highly profiled. If you live in the Southern California area, you've probably seen Dr. Chris Lowe, or any of the other Shark Lab people that are out there doing the work and being on TV or doing a news program doing some science communication, essentially, whether it be through media training that they've done and been on the media, been on the news, to talk about, where these juvenile great whites are going, what are they doing, how people should, perceive them. There's always something that they could talk about, and they're happy to do it, which I think is great. And I remember having Chris on the Beyond Jaws podcast, and he was talking a lot about, putting his graduate students and his undergraduate students that go through the lab in media training. and making sure that they know how to speak to the media, that they can, talk the journalistic talk, be able to do things in sound bites, which is not an easy thing to do. It's the training is very important to do that, because we just can't, like, our words can get turned around on us very, very quickly. And it's very important that you communicate with that, I guess, style and skill level to be able to make sure that your sound bites will be used properly, that they can't misuse your sound bites. And nobody's perfect, and it happens every once in a while, but I feel like the media training that Chris puts his graduates through, I think it's really important. I think it works out in their favor, and it's always a benefit to put on that resume, of course. But I think it's something that's, when he was on Beyond Jaws, he talked about, talking, and speaking with, lifeguards and, beaches and parks and so forth, the people that are involved with those areas and those habitats, to make sure that they have an interaction, make sure that they educate in the schools about the juvenile great whites and how important this habitat is and how good of a conservation story it is, right? To bring back the great white shark in that area is huge. It's a huge, huge deal. We don't get many great conservation stories. Just doesn't happen. It's just one of those things that, we have to talk about. And in this video, Shivers in the Shadows, the Shark Lab's call to action, the Shark Lab, all the lab crew are on it, and they're all talking, and there's great B-roll footage, and there's footage of great whites, like in the water, near surfers and boaters and swimmers even, and nothing happens. They're showing, how they're tagging sharks. They're showing, they're talking to Chris. They're talking to other people from the lab who are able to, converse. Obviously, they're able to talk about their research, why they joined the Shark Lab, why it's so important, and of course, they go back to the history of the Shark Lab. And I think, when you start to look at why this lab was put together, the history of this lab, the fact that Dr. Chris Lowe has been with the lab for over 25 years, maybe even longer, that's important. That's important to everybody, right? And when we start to see more labs be able to talk about their research, have that transparency, and to move into a better direction of understanding, then people are going to start interacting with the channel, with the lab. I hope more videos come out, on a regular basis. This was, I believe, an intern named Ava Dominicelli, who did a fantastic job in putting this documentary together. And I just hope that more of these types of videos come out for the lab, because it can talk about, their different projects. And it could talk about the field work, and it can explain a lot of the stuff that they do and why they do it. When you start to have that explanation, when you start to have these videos come out, all of a sudden people are like, this is pretty cool. Like, we'd like to see more. The people who are looking for this type of information, you yourself who's listening to this podcast because you want to know how to protect the ocean, you want to know more about the ocean, you go on these videos and you get more information from a different source and different sources, because within a lab, there's so many people from varied backgrounds, very cultural backgrounds, very professional backgrounds. They want to do different things, and to be able to get to know each and every one of them is just such a benefit to the lab, a benefit to the students, and a benefit to the audience who's watching, the viewers on YouTube or the people listening to the podcast, to talk about the troubles of field work, the challenges of being in the ocean and trying to tag a shark or trying to even find a shark. You can get some really funny clips, I'm sure, of stuff that happens, in the water. It's safe, obviously, but waiting and sometimes being successful in finding the species that you're looking for, or a shark in general. There was a time where I went out to a conference and I went out on a field trip, and it was to tag sharks, and we didn't find one shark. We stood out there for like 3-4 hours, had a great time, but no shark. Every time we brought in one of the hooks, the lines, no shark. But, that's field work for you. It doesn't happen often, but when it does, that's field work for you, and that's just the way it goes. And that's what people need to know. They need to know that sometimes it's great and sometimes you find nothing. You can do some great vlogs on that, and I think that's something that I'd love to do for a lab, or and do that for other people. But that's just something that people, I feel, need. people want. They want to know more information about what research is happening at universities, what research is happening on sharks, what research is happening on marine mammals, all these different things. These are the kind of programs. These are the kinds of content that people would like to see. And then you get to know the scientists while you do that. That is something that is powerful. That is something that we need more of. We need less of videos. Like, as I'm recording this, I'm looking at the video and I'm watching it it's paused right now, but I was watching it just before this, and it was the sound was off, and I'm just looking at the footage. And on the right-hand side, like I'm watching on my desktop computer, on the right-hand side, there's all the suggested videos. And I see all these suggested videos. And, I see fatal shark attack investigation from Shark Week. I see shark attacks on the Florida Space Coast. I see Jimmy spots over 10 great white sharks on Shark Week, and there's a big shark there. I see older than trees. That's a great Save Our Seas Foundation trailer, which is amazing, something that you should watch. But then I see 30 scariest shark encounters ever caught on camera, and this is like a great white shark is on the thumbnail and making it look scary. And then this is the biggest great white shark ever on camera. Another one, Hawaiian night fright when sharks attack. Think about that. You get the point. It's always something negative about sharks, always something scary about sharks. Here, we're looking at Shivers in the Ocean, which is kind of gives you a little bit of that predatory type of action that a shark will give, but then the Shark Lab's call to action, right? Truth be told, I think the title could be a little bit better, but I love this. The footage is great. It's got over 2,300 views. It was put up on December 18th. There could be a little bit more of a description, but the video is fantastic. And I feel as though this is a great starting point for this Shark Lab to get more videos out there to show people what's going on in the lab on a week by week basis. I think that's something that I would love to see more of. I think it would be great to see. And just put more positive content of sharks instead of having sharks attack, night fright, all these different titles that invoke this scary thing about sharks, right? Let's take the mystery away. Let's start to learn about sharks. Let's start to really love these sharks. I can't tell you how many times I've been at a party or I've been at a get-together or I've been at a lunch or a dinner, and I talk about, I have a shark podcast as well. And they're like, oh yeah, sharks, they scare me. I'm like, oh yeah, we talk about other sharks beyond Jaws, beyond the great white. We talk about great whites, but we talk a lot about lost sharks, goblin sharks and chimeras and, flat sharks and so forth. And people are like, oh yeah, those scare me. Like all those sharks type scare me. Tiger sharks and bull sharks, and I won't go in the water because of it. It's amazing how many people will still tell that to this day, even though we know so much about sharks, that it's not getting in front of them. That information is not getting in front of them. And there's so many people that would watch the content, that would click on it. This is the type of content people are looking for, that they don't even know they're looking for. They want it, but they can't find it because it's not available on a regular basis because, the incentive, and I get it from the other side, from a Shark Lab's point of view, the incentive is not necessarily there, right? A lot of researchers, a lot of scientists who are in academia or in nonprofit organizations do not get paid to put up this type of content. They do it because they love it. They do it because they feel and they see the need and they know the benefit of putting up videos, of putting up any kind of content talking about their research. Right now, some universities will allow, some universities won't allow, they'll frown upon it. But a lot of the labs do a really great job in putting out content, and more. You're starting to see more and more because the students that are coming through are offering this, right? Ava Dominicelli, who was the creator of this, was the producer, the director, the editor, I assume. My understanding is she's an intern in the lab. So she works in the lab, but this is something that she brought to the lab. She probably said, hey, Chris, why don't we put this together? I've got a whole plan for it. Maybe it was a project that he had her do. Because a lot of the graduate students, they have their classes, they have their assignments, they have their data they have to collect, they have their master's or PhD thesis to do. So they're already busy. It's very difficult to put these things on. So I'm fully aware of that. That's the challenge within an academic setting, even a nonprofit setting, of remembering or getting the people who have a passion to do this type of work, right? Because it does take a while. It is difficult. And a lab that's willing to do it, willing to support somebody to do that and say, yes, we can put this up. There's some research that you can't put up because it's secretive until the paper comes out or something like that, or sometimes they're dealing with endangered species, so they don't want to necessarily put it out. However, there are ways that you can put this out. Communication within your lab is really important. Suggesting it and offering ways of doing things, putting up practice videos, or going through practice videos and practicing your editing skills and your storytelling skills. This one that Ava did was a great story. Talking not only about what research goes on in the lab and how they look at gray white sharks, but also introducing individual members of the shark lab. That was like the underlying story that I love, because I want to get to know more and more scientists in marine biology and more conservationists in marine conservation. So this was a video that allowed to do this. It had a great underlying story, overall plot, beautiful imagery, beautiful videos, great interviews, great sound. Lighting could have been a little better in certain areas, but for the most part, it was wonderful. And it looked like it was all their own videos and their own work. And I love that. I think it's something that will really do well in the future and offer people more information on what goes on in the shark lab and really open up that transparency in science that's so needed, especially when it comes to communication. So kudos to the shark lab, to Dr. Chris Lowe's lab, all the people there, to Ava for putting that together. We're going to try and get them on Beyond Jaws to be able to discuss that. Maybe I can get Ava on this podcast to discuss what it's all about and what goes into putting that documentary together. But it's something that we really love to see in the science communication world, and I hope to see more of it. But that's the episode for today. If you have any questions or comments, I'm going to put the link to the video in the show notes. So if you're listening to this app and you want to listen to it or you want to watch it, you can do so. Just go into the app and there's like some notes in there, and there's going to be a link to the YouTube channel or the YouTube video, and you can check out the channel, subscribe to the channel in case they put out more. And I just think it's great. I just love it. So hopefully in the new year I can get Ava on and be able to discuss this documentary and what was put in. I'm working on a couple documentaries myself. And I'm looking forward to be putting out soon. And they're going to be video documentaries, like short ones, maybe 10 minutes long, 15 minutes long, and I'm looking forward to it. So I'll be able to have more insight into that when Ava comes on, because I've been putting these things together. But that's it for today's episode. If you have any comments or questions, please feel free to reach out to me on Instagram at How to Protect the Ocean. That's at How to Protect the Ocean, all one word. And you can also go to speakupforblue.com/contact. You can just leave me an email. I've been having some people over the holidays leave me some emails, which is great. Tell me what you think of the show or the program, the episode, what you think of the overall podcast. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. And then, of course, check out this video. And let me know what you think on Instagram, on DM me. All right, that's it for today's episode. I want to thank you so much. I hope everybody's having a great and safe holidays, as many of you are taking time off, including myself. And I'll be working on some things coming up in the new year, and probably some episodes coming out. Obviously this one will come out on Wednesday, on Friday, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. There'll be episodes coming out, and then in the future, what's going to happen in the new year. So I want to thank you so much for listening to this episode. And if you know anybody who wants to listen to this type of content, please feel free to share. Just hit the copy link on your app and send it to those of you love and that you think will love this episode. All right, thank you so much for listening. I'm your host, Andrew Lewin. Thanks for listening to the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. Have a great day. We'll talk to you next time, and happy conservation.